The biggest retirement mistakes usually don't happen 20 years into retirement. They happen during maybe the first 5 or 10 years. And now, these mistakes are ones that we often may not think too much about, but they are ones that are important. So think about it this way: you finally retire, your investments seem fine, you're paying your bills, the markets may be doing well. So we're assuming everything is on track, but beneath the surface, if we're not careful, we could be setting ourselves up for much higher taxes, lower lifetime income, unnecessary healthcare costs, or even running out of the flexibility that we desire later in retirement. This first decade of retirement is incredibly important because many of the decisions you make during this window create ripple effects that last for the rest of your life. So think about it this way: when you're climbing a mountain, being just one small degree off course doesn't seem like much. But climbing that for 20 miles into the future, you're on an entirely different mountain. And retirement can sort of work the same way. Small decisions made very early can compound into very large consequences later. So today, I would like to walk you through the 5 mistakes that we see retirees make most often during those critical early years. And more importantly, how to avoid them. Because retirement isn't just about having money saved, it's about making smart decisions with the money that you spent decades building. And if you're approaching retirement and you'd like help coordinating your investments, reviewing your income taxes and planning proactively, looking at Social Security decisions, healthcare planning with Medicare and long term care, and looking at estate planning and how it all works together with retirement income into one integrated plan, that's exactly what we do here at Cornerstone Wealth Planning. And there's a link below where you can schedule a conversation with our team if you'd like to see what the process looks like. Now, let's start with the mistake that catches more people than almost anything else by surprise. Mistake number 1: spending from the wrong accounts from a tax standpoint. Now, the first mistake isn't about spending too much, but it's about spending from the wrong place from a tax perspective, meaning using accounts in a manner that is not the most tax efficient. Now, many retirees naturally begin withdrawing from whichever account seems the easiest to access. This may even just be a savings account or a cash account. Maybe this is a brokerage account. Other times it's an IRA account. Now, sometimes they avoid touching their retirement accounts because they want them to keep growing. Now, obviously, this can sound logical. So it's not just about which account to draw from first, but it's about coordinating every account together. And here's why. Imagine 2 retirees with exactly the same investment portfolio. They have the same investments, which give them the same returns. And by the way, they spend the same amount of money. Yet one family could pay $1,000, $10,000, or even $100,000 more in retirement taxes over time. How could this be true? Because they controlled when they recognized income on the tax return. And maybe these folks who plan proactively are intentionally filling things like lower tax brackets with IRA withdrawals or Roth conversions. Maybe they completed some Roth conversions before they started required minimum distributions. And maybe they harvested things like capital gains during years when their tax rate was unusually low, potentially at 0% levels. Now, none of those decisions happen automatically. And this is why we often tell clients that retirement isn't an investment problem, but it's a sequencing problem. What I mean is, the order you pull money from often matters just as much as how much money you've saved. Now, that's one of the biggest differences simply between just managing investments and building a retirement income plan. Mistake number 2: treating the 4% rule like it's a law. Now, the second mistake is relying on a rule instead of building an integrated plan. Now, the famous 4% rule has become one of the most quoted retirement guidelines ever created. And here's what many people misunderstand about it: it was never meant to become a spending instruction manual. It was designed as a research item and a guideline. Real life, obviously, is a little bit messier, unpredictable. Markets produce returns that are different every single year. Healthcare costs don't always arrive on schedule. Family situations will change. Inflation's going to go up and down. And your goals will obviously change. And some years you'll spend more, Other years, you may actually spend a little bit less. And all these things are very normal. The danger comes when someone rigidly follows one withdrawal number, regardless of what's happening around them and in the context of their full plan. So, one of the biggest risks that we see during early retirement is something called sequence of returns risk. And that's simply a fancy way of saying poor market returns early in retirement can have an outsized impact. Why? Because you're withdrawing money while your investments could be temporarily down. And that's why having flexibility becomes so valuable. So maybe you can postpone something like changes for the car for just a year. Maybe you decide to take a little bit different vacation for this year instead. Maybe you temporarily spend from things like cash reserves when the markets recover. Just really small adjustments, and again, with balance across all of these, they can significantly improve the longevity of your retirement portfolio. And keep in mind, retirement isn't static. Your income strategy should not be either. And this brings us to mistake number 3, being too afraid to enjoy your retirement. Now, this one can surprise people because they often hear about warnings of just overspending. But honestly, after doing this for 20 years, I often see the opposite. People who've worked for 40 years and they save diligently, they've built an incredible nest egg, and unfortunately, many become afraid to really spend any of it. Before long, every vacation gets postponed, every dream experience is delayed, and just simple things are always put off until maybe next year. But here's something that we've learned after helping retirees for many years, that the healthiest years of retirement usually are not going to be your last 10 years. They're often your first 10. So those early years are when you typically have the health, you have the energy, you have the mobility, and the freedom to enjoy everything that you spent decades preparing for. And we've seen retirees delay something like the European vacation. Maybe they had their heart set on the RV and the cross-country tours, but they delay taking the entire trip as a family on that one memorable trip you wanted to do. And then what can often happen that's not expected but does occur is that health changes quickly. Maybe you get sick, a spouse gets sick, travel becomes really difficult. Before you know it, life simply changes. So that's why retirement planning isn't only about protecting money. It's about giving yourself permission to use it intentionally. One of the key ways to view money is that it is a tool. It's not the destination, but it's a tool. And one of our favorite conversations with clients is showing them that their retirement plan actually supports spending more confidently, not spending less. And when you know the numbers and how the plan works, enjoying retirement can become much easier. If that's something that you've struggled with, just please schedule a conversation with our team, and we can help provide some clarity around what your plan realistically could support for your expenses, income needs, and goals. This brings us to mistake number 4, that ignoring taxes until they show up. Now, many people assume that taxes may be lower or maybe disappear in retirement, and at times it can be true. But unfortunately, they usually just change forms, meaning that your paycheck may disappear, but your taxable income is still being created through things like your Social Security income, your traditional IRAs. And before long, you may have the required minimum distributions, which start in your 70s, even if you didn't need money from your IRAs. And these larger withdrawals, they certainly can push folks into higher tax brackets over time. So what we see is that not only is there that level of tax that's created, but also higher income can increase Medicare premiums through something known as IRMAA. And then all of a sudden we have capital gains that create their own planning opportunities and taxes. And so all these pieces, they start to really intersect and interact with one another. Now here's the important part. The best tax planning often happens before these problems actually appear, meaning that your early retirement years can create a unique planning window. Maybe you just retired and Social Security hasn't started yet. And often, or obviously, your required minimum distributions haven't begun yet because those will start in your 70s. So before you realize it and sort of think about it, you need to notate here in this situation that your income is temporarily lower for this year specifically. Now, if lower income in this year, it could create opportunities to perform great tax planning ideas and strategies. Roth conversions may be at relatively attractive low tax rates. Maybe you want to intentionally realize some gains while you're in 0% tax bracket levels, and this allows your investments to sort of reset their cost basis. Now, these aren't strategies that often make headlines, but over a 25 or 30-year retirement period, these can make an enormous difference of your after-tax wealth. And at Cornerstone Wealth Planning, this is the reason why our planning process integrates certified financial planner or CFP professionals, tax professionals with ones like a CPA designation and an EA designation, and estate planning guidance from an estate planning attorney, all put together in a coordinated manner for your planning purposes. Because we know that retirement decisions do not exist in isolation. Everything affects everything else. And this brings us to mistake number 5, having investments instead of a retirement plan. Now, what's one of the biggest mistakes of all is thinking that just a portfolio is the same thing as a integrated retirement plan, meaning that owning investments isn't a clear strategy for retirement. So having $1 million portfolio doesn't automatically answer very important retirement planning questions like, when should I claim Social Security? How much can I withdraw safely in retirement? Which account should my income for this year come from? Should I complete Roth conversions this year, next year, went into the future? And how do healthcare costs fit into this overall? And ultimately, how much should we leave to our children? And how do we properly plan for one spouse passing away? So these answers require coordination. So that's why before we even start discussing investments with many prospective clients, we first want to build what we call a retirement blueprint. Let's identify what you own, what you owe, your retirement income, your spending in retirement. Let's identify that income gap between the two, and then your withdrawal rate from the portfolio. After that, we can optimize for taxes, Social Security, healthcare, estate, and overall portfolio and retirement income. Because once those pieces fit together, the investments become much easier to manage. But without a written plan, then every decision would feel more uncertain. But with a plan, you know why you're making each decision, and you can have clarity and confidence. And that's really where confidence truly comes from. Not certainty about markets, but confidence about your process. The first 5 to 10 years of retirement create this foundation with everything else in retirement to follow. So if we spend from the wrong accounts, or if we ignore our taxes, if we become just too conservative from a portfolio aspect too early, or take unnecessary investment risk, or if we start to operate without a coordinated strategy across all these areas, then these really small decisions can quietly cost us far more than any down market period or a bear market could ever cause. But the good news is this, that every one of these mistakes is avoidable. And how is it avoidable? Well, it's avoidable through thoughtful, careful, deliberate planning. So this first decade of retirement can become the strongest decade for you for retirement. Now, if you would like help building a coordinated retirement income plan and strategy, one that's going to coordinate all these different areas, investments, taxes, Social Security, healthcare decisions, estate planning, into one integrated roadmap, that's what we do for folks every single day, and we would love to help. Now, there's a link below where you can schedule a conversation with our team at Cornerstone Wealth Planning. We're going to help you first identify your income gap in retirement, optimize that withdrawal strategy to reduce taxes now and later, and to build a sustainable retirement plan that's designed around your goals, not generic rules. If you found this video helpful, please be sure and subscribe, because every week we do share practical retirement planning strategies that are designed to help pre-retirees and retirees who want to make smarter financial decisions with the money they've worked so hard to build. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.